Hello everybody. I'm going to, real quick, I want to just make a short little video to help with the C++ unit that we're starting out here. I didn't want to cover anything too major, not in a live class, but I did want to cover something that would maybe help out with this assignment for this week one. It's not particularly hard and you don't really need to, but I'd want to provide this little helpful video for the future so that you kind of know where we're going with and what type of, if you can see the name of this, REPL, and what kind of data we're gonna be dealing with. So I just booted up a fresh uh, compiler here, and I've noticed that on C++ REPL is a little slower than it is for Python. So if you want to find a different compiler, that's perfectly fine. I will likely keep using it, at least for the classes and demonstrations, that kind of stuff. So, first thing I want to do is just kind of talk about the different types of data that we're going to come across. So first, I'm going to put this up in a comment at the top. First type we're going to have are like words. What we're going to have are characters, which is going to be called strings. Most of this stuff should be review if you've done any sort of other programming language, but if not, a string is your characters. Like if you had your values and you had something in here that was your name, right? That's right there. Name would be a string. Another type is an integer, which is something that's like the number 5. Doesn't have any decimal points. It's a counting number. I'm just going to quickly blow through these and then I'll show you an example. The next one is the character, which is just for one value. You're going to use a single apostrophe, and then this could be like A. If you wanted to have a singular character, it's just a more limiting version of the variable, but it does have some application. Next is what's called, this is another number type of variable. This is a float. And the float is some sort of number that has a floating decimal point. So it's not a whole number. I mean, it could be, but it's not exclusively whole numbers. So you could have something like 10.2. That would be a float. Next, what's more useful than a float is what's called a double. A double is another number value that has more decimal places that you could store. So for this one, you could have your 3.1415, going on and on and on and on. Doubles store much more data in them, more decimal points. I'll just cut it off there for now. It stores much more data types, so it's very, very useful. And honestly, we won't really be using floats much because of doubles, but either way, a float can get the job done in most cases. And then the last type that's super important is a Boolean. Boolean is a true-false. Like if you have an if statement, it'll return a Boolean. And this could be true. It could be false. Those are really your only two options for that. So that's just real quick. I wanted to show what that looks like. Also wanted to just remind you that every line that is completed that's not in a text line will have a semicolon at the end of it. I'll go ahead and show that as I'm working on this little basic code. But I'm just going to show you some application of these, what you might use it. So I'm just going to have like a transcript here, just a little information about a student. So we'll go ahead and say, we'll tell C++ that this variable, the name, is a string. We'll call the name Brian because I know that guy. He's pretty cool. And then, oh, mistake. I need to, before I can do that, I need to use the namespace std. Forgot to include that. That's something that's very useful in most of the programming that we're going to be doing, is including that namespace. After that, I'm going to go ahead and get our next value here. We'll get an integer value for my age. Hang on, I don't like that the string isn't working. Get this value for my age. Anyway, I'm 18 years old. And then we'll say in this programming class, there isn't a grade for this class, but we'll say that my grade it has to be a single character. We'll just say it's an A. I'd like to think so. I am the teacher. I'm gonna go ahead and add. I could do a float with this, but I think I am just gonna use a double because it's simpler. The double for my GPA is a 3.956. We'll just go ahead and use that, and we'll get a boolean here, and we'll say is male. This will determine the gender, and I'll say that's true because I am a male. So if you wanted to, you want to be careful with how you name this because a boolean can only be true or false. So you can't say gender and then have your options be male or female. The options for a boolean have to be true or false. And then I'm going to have our cout, which is our output. And normally you put the std there, but using this namespace, it makes that a lot easier. But on the cout, I want to print some information. Now I could say, or just print out the name Brian. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say end L, which is essentially saying end the line. And I'll go ahead and show what that does after I return 0 semicolon. So the reason I put the end L there is because it shows that the line is ending, and so the next time I print, I do a cout, it will go to the next line. There are other ways that you can do it. You could also, if you wanted to, inside do an N or a \n, that would do the exact same thing, goes to a new line. You can see that it took a while for REPL to give me what I asked for, which is why you may want to try and find some other compiler. Whatever type of submission you do is fine. So yeah, this is what's called a constant right here. If I want to go back and change what this prints, I have to change what's inside of here. But what I want to do is use a variable, because when it comes down to it, you're going to have potentially, if you're writing, let's say for whatever reason you're writing a story using C++, well, you're going to probably reference this name a lot. So if you were to have a 100-page story in C++, you're probably going to reference that name at least 100 times. So if you decide, you know what, actually, I don't want to call this guy Brian, I want to call this guy David. Alright. Well, now you have to go through your entire story and change it one by one. So that's why constants are useful if you know you're only going to use it one time. Otherwise, stick with the variable, and then you can just say, I want this guy to be David, change the name of the variable, instantly changes everything. For this case, I'm going to keep it as Brian, and I'm going to show you what I would have here. So if I wanted to output the name, my name, I'll actually change it to something else because that's a little, want to make sure it prints something else. I'll say output that age. Now you can choose any of these or multiple of them if you wanted to. That's perfectly fine. But you can see that this is taking a bit of time here, which is, I mean, as you're going to be doing this, you're definitely going to want to have more speed while you're doing it, especially if you're trying to debug some program. It's going to be very nice to have a little more speed on your side. But for this purposes, I think REPL has a really good UI, so I'll just keep using that. But you are absolutely free, like I said, to try something else, because you can see this is ridiculous how much time it's taking. Okay, there it goes. So it's gave me the age of 18. Now what I want to do here is, you can see I didn't give it that line L, so it was really squished in there. So you would do end L. Sorry, yeah, your ending of the line if you wanted to. Now you may have noticed that I'm using these greater or less than signs, and this is essentially, if you are a fan of Python, which I am a fan of Python, if you wanted to do like a print, you would say print your variable 1, comma, your variable 2, comma, and that's how you would print out multiple things. But that is not the case for C++. For C++, you'll do cout. You're going to do your first variable, variable 1, and then you're not going to do commas. I just instinctively did it there. You're going to use the same double less than, and then you're going to say your variable 2, and then I like to do end L because it makes it looks nice. But yeah, that's a very different format. It doesn't have the parenthesis or the commas. You just put this in there, and this will interrupt some things, and you'll see as I go into class on Wednesday, this next class, I'll show you how it's very useful in certain areas to do that. But if I wanted to, on the cout, return multiple items, I could say I want to know the age, and I want to know the grade, and the GPA. So I have all of these less than signs separating these various variables that I have. And you'll see it'll be different from last time because it'll have that line at the bottom, which helps with the spacing. But there will be one issue with this when I print it, as you'll see, is that it's just going to squish them all together because I didn't say to add a space between them. And that's this kind of formatting stuff that you will have to tackle with your own issues. And if it doesn't bother you, that's fine. But as you're getting with numbers, like you can see, 18A 3.956. If I switched age and grade, it'd be A 183.956. So you can see the value of putting a space there. So what you could do easily for that is just put a little space and separate it. So now that is another element of this, of what is going to be printed out here. Did it again there, and now it'll format much nicer once it finally prints. But yeah, that's actually all I wanted to go over today, was just the variables that you are always going to be using, and just how useful they are, and also what the types of them will look like. So we have our string, integer, character, float, double, and boolean. I don't even see us using character or float a whole lot, simply because string and double, for character and float respectively, hold more information and have a wider use case. Of course, there's a time and place for everything. Like here I have the grade is just a single letter. Let's find out what you want to do, and feel free to use whatever variable you like, as long as it works. This finally printed, and you can see that it now has spaces, so we can do some more easily reading with this. And I would normally get these clearly labeled, like say you have a string that says my age equals, and then a string that says my grade equals, that kind of stuff. But for right now, as it serves for the example, this is a very simple idea. C++ is a little different, but it's a pretty good language to learn, especially because so many things use it. And variables are just very, very important. Very important. You will not be able to do some higher level stuff without using variables. With that said, that's all I wanted to cover for today. Took a bit longer than I wanted, but I want to make sure that you guys are going to be able to have this going into class in these future assignments. All right. Thanks.